Hello everyone, it's Georgia down in Australia and welcome back. Yes, once again, I'm singing that old song. It's been such a long time, but here I am making another YouTube video and there's a whole lot of stuff going on in the background as per usual. But today I am going to journal Psalm 23 and I'm going to use a design that I have kind of used in the past in an art journal, and if you hang out in any of my social places, you'll be very familiar with it because I reshare it over and over and over again, and I have shared it recently. And I thought I would take that design and put it onto a Bible page. Now, I need to journal this psalm at this point in time, many reasons. One of the reasons being that we have just celebrated Good Shepherd Sunday, and Psalm 23 was the psalm of the day, and there's a whole lot of things that are going to happen on this page as we journal along that I may or may not talk about that have to do with that. But also during the Mass this past weekend, my priest said something in his homily that kind of reminded me of something, and I may or may not talk about it, perhaps in the Patreon group. Who knows? I'm not quite sure where this is going. This is going to be released early for my patrons and will later become public for everybody. But somewhere along the way, I may or may not talk about this thing that I heard and what it reminded me of. And that's kind of led to a whole lot of things. But one thing in particular is that I have taken a bit of a step back with the creative process and everything that I'm doing. There are so many things that I'm doing, and I don't know, the word chaos keeps coming up. Again, I may or may not talk about this in one of my places, we'll see. But what I've done is I have actually pulled out one of my original, or the original journaling Bible, which some of you may know was one volume, of course, my first journaling Bible, and it got to the point where it was falling apart. I'd given it spine surgery quite a few times, wasn't working, so I tore the covers off, pulled the actual Bible apart into 3 lots, and rebound it into little golden book covers. It was kind of cool and cute at the time, and then I really regretted it afterwards because I really loved the old Bible that was falling apart, held together by a big lace ribbon. But anyway, what's done is done. But I've gone back to that Bible, and if I can find a page, this is one of those Bibles that has, on some pages, not all of them, but on many pages, has pictures down the side of the page in the journaling column. And when I first got this journaling Bible, I used to colour those in and maybe, lightly colour some of the verse, and that was it. And I soon got to the point where I was just doing my own stuff, and these things in the margins got a little bit annoying. So I have actually, prepping for this page, I have white gessoed the design that was in the margin because I don't want it. I'm doing my own thing. Now, because of the way I've bound this, it doesn't quite sit right. So it's going to be a little bit difficult, and there is lumpy stuff underneath, so I'm going to need my little plastic sheet just to give this a smooth surface. Now, I have very lightly highlighted this psalm in the past, so that is going to just stay as it is. Now, I know a lot of the pages that I journal lately, I pick out a focus verse or a line, or sometimes even just a few words, and they're the only things that stand out, and the rest of the chapter or whatever it may be gets kind of covered over, partially or totally even. But for today, I actually want the entire psalm to be visible. So I'm going to, perhaps, I don't really need to do this because it's so big and obvious. I'd be really silly if I accidentally painted over it. But because, you never know, when I'm filming and talking at the same time, I might just kind of, like right now, lose focus. So I'm going to cover it just in case. Not so much because I think I'm going to be so careless that the paint is going to go over this big, obvious, huge psalm, but because, just to remind myself, hey, this is the part that we're keeping clear, remember, because I might forget. So my psalm is under here, and I'm going to grab a pencil. This design is really simple. It's basically just a whole lot of swervy lines that I colour in different shades of blue and green to kind of look like hills, pastures, still waters, that kind of theme that goes along with the psalm. Now, normally when I do one of these pages, I would pick some of the words or a line from the psalm, for instance, and I would write that out. But because the entire psalm is going to be visible, I've got something else in mind that I'm going to write, very completely, totally related to it, but slightly different wording. So I'm thinking in my head, counting out how many lines I'm actually going to write, because this is going to be kind of long, unusual for me. So there's going to be 4 lines, so I'm going to make sure I've got 1, 2, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I will actually continue that look. So I've got a little section here, section there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in all. Now, however many sections you divide your page into is completely up to you. You can do lots of little ones if you want. What I've done in the past is I've actually taken the lines of the psalm. The original one that I did, I actually used the church bulletin that the psalm was printed in, cut out the lines of the psalm, and each of these hills had one line from the psalm printed, cut out, inked around the edge and stuck, so that I had the Lord is my shepherd on one hill, there's nothing I shall want on the next one, etc., etc., etc. But it's completely up to you how you do this. You may want to put out the whole paint all your hills and separate the whole psalm, if depending on whether you're doing it in an art journal or on your Bible. If you're doing it in an art journal, then you'll need to provide your own words, and so you may want to have a separate hill for each line. If you're doing it in your Bible, then you might not want to write anything on the hills. You might want to do it just as decoration, or you might want to pick one particular line from the psalm and write that out. So it's up to you how many hills you do. I'm grabbing my makeshift palette. I'm putting a protective paper underneath so that I don't get paint down the side and onto the edges of the other pages. And I'm thinking I might go blues and blues here, so this is kind of like the still waters, and then green, 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 and then maybe a lighter blue up the top of the sky. Something like that. Not quite sure. I'm making this up as I go. So I'm going to I'm grabbing a blue first. And I'm simply going to paint over. Now I'm not worrying about the fact that I'm painting over these words. This is just what I do. Now if you are painting in your Bible and you are a person who does not like to paint over the words, now there's no right or wrong whichever way you do it. But if you are painting in your Bible and you don't want to paint over the words, you could do this in watercolor, in which case it will be quite translucent and you'll be able to see the words through it. Or if you have a Bible that has a very big margin, then you could just paint the colors in the margin and then have a sort of a little rough like this edge to it, so that, and paint like at the bottom and the top of words like this, so that you can still see all your words but not have the paint covering it. So it's totally up to you how much you cover. And also, if you really want to have the full effect of the colored hills or the colored levels, I'm not quite sure what we're calling them at this point, but you really don't want to paint over the words of your Bible, then this is when an art journal is really fabulous, because you have control over what words are in the journal. You can paint your design on a blank page and then print out and cut out the words that you want to stick on. I'm not quite sure if that made sense, but so I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to follow through with a whole lot of different colors and make my way up and down the page. Now once I've painted one layer, I'm going to skip the next one and go to the one above that. That way I don't have wet paint next to wet paint, because I don't actually want these two to be blending. So I'm skipping one, going up to the next one here, which is the one that is around my taped off verse, and I'm just going to paint that one. I'm painting it on quite thickly because I want this to be a very solid coloured design. So as it starts to dry, I actually go through and give it a second layer in some places. So it's nice and thick. Okay, so again, skipping the next layer and going right up to the top. And I know I said something about a sky before, but I don't think there's actually a plan here because I'm going with a turquoise now. I'm more at a point of using pretty green and blue shades, not really thinking about reality and what it's supposed to be. But that's kind of the way that I roll anyway. I don't paint my Bible saying this design has to look like such and such. I tend to paint more intuitively. Okay, so that's my turquoise top of the page. If that's a sky, well, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. And just to kind of bring things together, I'm going to grab a little bit of that dark green, tiniest bit, dab it off my paper, and just put some tiny little bits of, I don't know, it's not meant to be anything, okay? Just some little streaks of that darker green into my turquoise. So that kind of brings those two layers together and makes it part of a whole picture rather than just stagnated levels of color. Okay, so this bottom one is almost dry, so I'm going to now grab some dark blue, and I might also put a little bit of white on my palette. I may or may not need that, we'll see. And I'm going to colour that bottom part dark blue. Again, I'm painting it on quite thick. Now, if you have a little bit of overlap between your layers, don't worry, because I am actually going to put a divider line between them. I'm going to get a black marker, I think a black marker at this point, and draw that line between the layers. So if there's a little bit of an overlap or it gets a little bit messy along the edge, I'm really not worried. And this is the part where I say this is why I had the white paint. I'm going to grab just a little bit of white and just lighten that up with just a few streaks of the white, just to give it a little bit of movement almost, so I don't have this just very dark bottom of my page, and then it doesn't quite blend into the next lighter layer because it's not what I want, but it gives a hint of that next lighter color. Okay, so once that's done, I move up to number 3, this color. This one is called Ocean by Dina Wakley. And this one I won't add anything to, I'm just going to leave it as solid color. And that brings me up to the last one, which will be a very green. And same with that one, I'm not going to add anything to it. Now the tape I've used is Sizzix Makers tape, which does not stick. It sticks really well to mask. It's actually not meant to be a masking tape, it's meant to be a die holding tape. But as a Bible journaling mask, it's fabulous because it sticks really well to the page, so you can carry on, do your art like this, but it does not stick in such a way that it peels the words off. You can peel it off really easily. So I'm taking that off now before the paint dries, because I finished the majority of my painting. I can uncover the words now so I can see what it looks like with the words and showing through there, and it actually does look a lot better, obviously. Okay, so now I need to let this dry really well. I'm kind of feeling a bit weird about this dark green. It looks really dark, so I might try and fix that now. I'm going to just give it another layer of that green, which I know seems counterintuitive since I've just said it's looking really dark, but because it's dry, if I add anything to it now, it's just going to sit on the top, and I want to do a bit of blending, so I'm just putting a little bit of a thin layer of the paint so that when I come in with my white like this, I can actually blend it out a little bit and not just have white streaks over the top of green paint. So that's a little bit better. It was just looking a little bit too harsh. Okay, now I am going to let that dry overnight, I think, and I'll come back to it in the morning when it's really, really dry. So once my paint is really dry, I have a very solid coloured background, which is great. Now I want to do a couple of things, or three things. I'm going to draw lines between the layers to differentiate between them. I want to add little doodles and decorations to each layer, and I want to write some words. Now I'm going to do the word writing before the doodling so that I don't end up running out of space to put my words. But first of all, I'm going to separate those layers. Now you could do the lines in black or white, or you could do no lines at all. It's up to you. If you're doing black, a Sharpie works really, really well. I'm going to use a Posca paint pen simply because it does a really nice solid line. I might move this out for now. And I'm just going to draw my lines. So this has quite a thick tip, so it's giving me a nice thick solid line. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do around the psalm. I don't know if I'll do my usual scribble thing or what. I haven't really thought that far ahead. Now don't worry if it's not perfect or if you can see a little bit of colour coming through on the wrong side. It's really not an exercise in perfection. And as I said earlier, I'm not going to write lines from the psalm because the psalm is here and completely visible, so I don't need to rewrite what's already there. So I'm actually going to write lines from a hymn that is based around Psalm 23, and I have chosen 4 lines. And because these to the top and bottom areas that I'm writing on are quite dark, I'm going to write on those in white, and then on these 2 areas I'm going to write in black. So it's going to go white, black, black, white. So what you decide to write, of course, is up to you. I'm going to do that writing first before I add doodling or anything else. That way I know how much space I have to spare. Once I have my words written and the paint has dried, I can start putting my little decorations and doodles. Now the first thing I'm going to use is this washi tape with little sheep on it. This is such a popular tape when I bring it to my art group, and the kids love this so much. I've gone ahead and cut out some of the sheep in advance, so you don't have to watch me cutting out little sheep from washi tape. And I have been a little bit lazy and left some of the background, but fussy cutting little sheep off washi tape right now is just a little bit beyond my patience. I'm just going to stick a few little ones here and there because they're just so cute. I'm being very cliche with the sheep, I know, but it had to be done. And now I'm going to use a white gel pen just to add little decorations. The first thing I'll do is just do some little white sort of grass bits around my sheep so they don't look like they're just floating there in the air. It kind of connects them to the page a little bit. Just little scribbles. It's supposed to be grass, could be anything. Then I'm just going to add some other kind of doodles around the page, so I'll just do some hearts on this section if my pen decides to work. And then here I'll do just some little spirally kind of designs. Now whatever you do, it's totally up to you. There's no, well, I was going to say there's no rhyme or reason, but there kind of is. There's a little bit of secret journal-y stuff going on in the design for me, but what you choose to do might have to do with the actual verse, might have to do with the words that you've written, it might have to do with just you and what you are trying to say with your page, or it could just be completely random designs. There is no right or wrong here. I'm having issues with my gel pen. I think it just does not like writing on this particular paint that I've used here. need to go very, very slowly. So I am going for a kind of water theme design with the swirls here, I guess. And I'm just doing little cross designs on this section. I don't want to overdo it, so I'm not covering the entire area with little designs, just little bits off on the side, just to give it a little bit of interest. All right, and what to do up the top, I'm not quite sure at the moment. So let's address this psalm here in the center. I'll just get some colored markers, and just using the green, I'm going to do a bit of a sort of scribble border thing, which is my thing, I guess. And then I'll use a bit of blue. So I'm using the colors that I've used in my layers here, obviously not exactly the same color, but the same sorts of shades, just to scribble around my little verse. And that kind of gives it a look that it's not just so sitting there on its own. I might just I'm doing some scribbles with the white as well. Just to make it look like it's more part of the page rather than something that I've obviously masked off. Okay. Now I don't really want to put, I played with the idea of maybe writing Psalm 23 up here, but it's kind of obvious there's the big 23, we're in the Psalms, and I don't want to add any more words because there's enough words here in the bottom part of the page. So I might just, I'm going to repeat my patterns up here. I'm going to put more of the hearts. There's nothing wrong with repeating patterns. Now, my apologies, my iPad storage was full, I didn't realize, and it stopped filming during this process. So you kind of missed out on me scribbling over the top 2 bits, but you haven't missed much. I did some hearts here. I sort of started doing this random little squiggly line design. Don't know where I was going with it, but this happened. It's, you know, it's okay. It's not great, but, you know, it is what it is. And little cross design up the top to sort of reflect the bottom part of my page. And this is pretty much it. I'm not doing anything else. I could do a scribble border, but I think that would detract from the simplicity of the design. There is nowhere really for journaling. I could do some journaling up here, but I'm going to leave it. There is secret journaling that comes with this page. Now, if I wanted to, I could write it up here. I could add a little fold out pocket somewhere. I could add something on the side. But sometimes the secret journaling is not in the words that you write and not in the words that you say. Sometimes the secret journaling just kind of happens in the process and words don't really come close. So that's kind of what happened today, or this past couple of days, or this past week, past 2 weeks. It's been this has been a process, not the actual page, but everything that comes along with it. It's been a process. It's still a process. Okay, so art-wise, page is done. So it's a very simple design, really easy to do, and you could actually use it for all kinds of pages and pretty much any verse. You can adapt it, change the colors, change the designs, use it for anything you like. So this is one of those great when you really, really want to get into your Bible journaling, but you've got no inspiration, you really want to journal a particular page or art a particular page, but you just don't know where to go with it. Separate it out into different layers and colour them whatever colour seems to go with your verse. Pick out some words or write your own words and do a bit of sort of mindful doodling as you create your page. So this has been my Psalm 23. Probably not the first time, definitely not the first time that I've arted this psalm. There's a whole story behind that as well. But if you decide to make a page like this, I would love to see it. I will, in the description below, put all my social places so you can come over and say hello. This will be, as I mentioned earlier, released early for my patrons on my Patreon channel, and in a few weeks will become public on YouTube for everybody else. Sorry, not playing favorites or anything, but yeah, I'm playing favorites. Okay, so thank you very much for joining me. Please do all those things, the thumbs up and the commenting and all that sort of thing. And again, if you create a page like this, I would love to see it. I will catch you in the next one. Bye.